and welcome on 99 Media. Today we had the chance to speak with two great critical economists, Professor Lefteris Tsoulfidis and Michael Roberts, to whom we asked the question that is lingering behind all talks about the future of the economy. Is AI just a bubble? Or will it be a new general purpose technology upon which a new cycle of growth could be built? And how will that impact on the welfare of society? Will it create more jobs than the ones it will destroy? Also, which type of jobs? Which social classes will be most affected by this development? In order to understand these questions, we try to reconstruct how economic thought has so far framed the role of technology in explaining economic growth and its cycles, focusing especially on the Schumpeterian theory of creative destruction that is upheld by mainstream economists, and on the Marxian-inspired theory of long cycles of capital accumulation, upon which Professor Tsoulfidis recently published a book in 2024. Enjoy the interview. All right, good morning. Let's get. Thank you, Professor Lefteris Tsoulfidis, for being with us today, and Michael as a usual guest. And so today we were going to have a discussion on the topic of AI and try to link it with the literature on the so-called long cycles or in Schumpeterian view, creative destruction. Recently, at the World Economic Forum, there were many panels discussing AI as a general purpose technology upon which possibly a new systemic cycle of accumulation could be built. One panel in particular saw the participation of economists Howitt and Aghion, winners of the Nobel Prize in 2025, that followed the Schumpeterian view of the role of technological change and of creative destruction as a driving mechanism that determines long waves of capital accumulation. As a first question, please allow me to start with a rather simplistic one. Do you think that AI could function as a bedrock of this new cycle of economic growth? I'm aware that the question is probably require a long answer, but maybe we can start with a yes or no, just to take a general vibe.
Well, I think mainstream economics and obviously the AI companies and the capitalist strategists in general really are hoping that artificial intelligence will be the savior of capitalism. We've had a period of stagnating growth, not particularly in the advanced economies of the world, and poor levels of increases in income, and productivity growth has been poor, investment growth has been poor, and above all, from the point of view of Marxism, profitability has been at relatively low levels until fairly recently. So the hope is that we have a new phase of technology that we haven't seen for maybe decades that could transform the picture in the major economies and make a step change in productivity growth. And also it would benefit from higher profitability and therefore take the major economies forward into a new period of boom. That is the hope and expectation. That is the claim that is being made. The AI companies think it will transform the picture dramatically in terms of productivity. There are many doubts about that, whether it can be applied, whether it will spread across generally to all sectors of the economy, make a difference or not, or whether it turns out that many AI models and products are faulty, unable to deliver in that way. And it's early days to decide that. I don't know whether Lefteris thinks differently or has a different view on how it might go over the next few years with AI.
I think I agree with Michael. He's right. I mean, there is a falling rate of profit, or the rate of profit these days is far lower than it was in the 1960s or even earlier. That means that even though AI might be a general purpose technology and may promote growth, etc., the rate of profit is already very low, which means that we are in a very slippery, so to speak, period of time, which can be the economy can be affected by anything. So this is something that makes us think that yes, AI may work as previous innovations, major innovations, but the rate of profit is already very low. It means that we are in a very slippery road. And at the same time, in order for the new technologies to work themselves out, they need a new, so to speak, institutional framework, new structures of accumulation, social structures of accumulation. And it seems that there is no desire for such a thing. On the contrary, those that already exist are in the process of, making them less able to work themselves out. So the answer is yes and no, depending on the conditions that I mentioned.
I would just add that we have seen, and perhaps we can talk about it later, a bit of a tick up in profitability since the pandemic slump, which Lefteris has also identified. And that increase in productivity, which is profitability, which isn't insignificant, could provide some sort of incentive for the investments that are being made in AI to deliver higher productivity and then perhaps snowball that profitability up over the next period. But it's still in doubt because there are so many, the bubble, the massive investments taking place and the stock market boom on it is way, way beyond any significant returns that we can see appearing at the moment over the next few years. They could appear, but at the moment they don't seem to be on the books either in terms of productivity or in terms of returns on capital.
If I may also add to what Michael said, is the following, that the increase in profitability that we identified in the recent years, that is to say after 2020, after the pandemic, in other words, is attributed mainly to government intervention. And a lot of spending has been taking place. And if we know the Keynesian multiplier, we will observe a jump in profitability, but then remains at the same level. That is to say, does not increase further. So in the 2020, we had an upward shift of profitability, but then remained pretty much stable. In other words, did not show any variation to the upward direction. I don't know if I'm clear, but this is what I have observed.
Yeah, it's clear. Actually, related to this in a different panel still at Davos, experts debated whether current stock market evaluation of AI companies is appropriate or if it is rather reflecting a bubble. Many panelists emphasize the importance of understanding whether AI will deliver on productivity gains. However, Gita Gopinath, which is like a fairly mainstream economist, I think made an observation that I think is quite important. She emphasized the difference between productivity growth and profitability. Could you help us understand the difference between these two concepts?
Well, in basic terms, we have productivity means output per worker per hour in a statistical sense. How that's created will be through a better technology or through shedding of labor. So less workforce, more production, or with the same workforce, an increased level of production by using new technology. So that's productivity, but capitalism it only sees productivity as the result of its investments in order to deliver higher profitability. And Gita Gopinath is making the point that all this investment that's taking place massively by the AI companies may not deliver in terms of profitability. That's the amount of profit made per unit of production or the amount compared to investment over the next period. And if it doesn't, that demonstrates there's a huge bubble of the stock market prices of these companies, which, by the way, are beginning to fall away in the last few days, have way, way beyond what the returns might be as far as she can see. And if there's a bubble that collapses or bursts, then we could see a severe collapse in production and investment, in effect, a slump of some proportions, which she measures, I forget, quite significant for. I think the IMF also has a similar view. Just to finish on that point, my view is that, yes, that's quite likely. The question is what happens after that? Does the productivity enhancement gains from AI still exist? Will they then take the production forward and then provide a new period of growth? There's one mainstream economists in Stanford University who argue that productivity goes in the form of a J curve when we have general purpose technology. First of all, you introduce the new technology. It actually takes productivity down for a period. So you can imagine a J, the initial J goes down, and then it swings up again after a period. And they claim that this is what happened in the 1990s, and they suspect that this will happen again. I wonder if they're right.
I don't know if Lefteris want to add anything, otherwise we can move on to the next question.
I would like to talk more about the relationship between productivity and profitability, and start saying that her observation is something that economists, starting from major economists of the past, starting from Adam Smith, were arguing about it. And this is something that takes place in the labor process, where we have division of labor. Division of labor leads to higher productivity. Higher productivity leads to mechanization, because division of labor has some limits. These limits can be overpassed with new investment in planted equipment, in new machinery, and this new machinery enables further division of labor, and this leads to higher productivity, lower cost, lower prices, higher market share for the businesses that they do this. This is something that someone can find it in the labor process in Capital Volume 1, but can also find it in the business literature in corporate finance. If you will find it there. You won't find it in neoclassical economics. You will find there, though, this period of time that marginal cost through AI reaches zero, which means that the profit margins increase immensely. This increases profits, but does not mean that increases profitability, because profitability must be profits over invested capital. And the invested capital is something unbelievable in size. In the US, is estimated that it is about 2 or 3% or even more of the GDP, which is immense if we think about it. So over time, the denominator, that is to say the invested capital, increases faster than the numerator, although both they increase, but the rate of their increase is different. The denominator increases faster, and so it means that the rate of profit falls, and we are already in a situation that is unstable. I mean, the rate of profit is very low. With all this, I want to say it doesn't necessarily follow that we are going to have a long cycle like in the previous times. There is no necessarily repetition. I mean, it's not certain what we're going to have in the future. Everything is possible. And certainly, I again say that it is required to have new institutions domestically and internationally. Without this, I don't think that profitability can remain and encourage new investment, growth and employment, etc. In any case, even though we are going to have everything on this growth process will be the one that creates less jobs than in the past. because of the nature of technological change, which with AI, all this, I think that they destroy more jobs than those that they create.
Take one last question.
Uh, uh,
So I'm gonna try to merge question 3 and 4, and then maybe you can take on. So in terms of like, because these sort of like the problem of profitability is really what will then drive these long cycles of growth. And in the economic literature, this is indeed a big topic of conversation that is actually common to at least two schools of economic thought, namely a mainstream one that follows Schumpeter theory of creative destruction, and one that originated with Kondratiev, that even though he himself wasn't maybe fully a Marxist, I will leave that aside, but then it has been taken up a lot by Marxian economists, like, for example, I remember Ernst Mandel, a prominent one, and also Anwar Shaikh, and economists like yourself. So I was going to ask you if you could help us sort of like tell the story of what it is meant by this theory of long cycles. And given that we are in the context of a Marxist framework, what will be the conditions that allow for a reprise in the rate of profit and the start of a so-called long boom? So maybe a, a comparison between previous waves and current waves will be quite useful, also to give like a real example for everyone to help understand a bit more concrete, at a more concrete level, this topic that is quite complex otherwise.
That's definitely one for Lefteris.
Um, you, I think, asked me, Michael had asked me this question some time ago, not too long ago, but
Yeah.
uh, well, we have various approaches. We have the Schumpeterian approach, as you mentioned, and it's not only Schumpeter. I think is also there are other people that they argue the same, and they emphasize the innovations that they come in together. I mean, like clusters of innovations, major innovations that they change the economy. But this is an exogenous, let us say, explanation. There is no way to, they don't explain how these innovations appear. They just say when they are introduced, they start the upward stage of a long cycle, and at the point they reach their maturity, and then they start decaying until a new wave of innovations appear, and this is a period of time that takes 50 years plus or minus 5 years. And to understand it, you may think of the railroads that they were introduced in the 1840s, and up until 1873, until the whole network of railroads is built, there was growth. But after that, the railroad system, railroads network was built, and therefore after that we have, after 1873, we have a period of decay. So Schumpeterians argue for innovations. We have also another theory of the social structures of accumulation, which again, they have an exogenous explanation of long cycles. They say all of a sudden we have new institutions domestically and internationally, and these institutions enable the starting of a long cycle. And these institutions, after the passage of some time, they are not suitable to the economy. They decay, and with them the economy decays until new institutions are built, and so forth. You mentioned Mandel as a Marxian, so to speak, explanation of the long cycles. I would like to say about him, about his view, that long cycles depend on the rate of profit. That is to say, a rising rate of profit means that we are in the upward stage of the cycle. A falling rate of profit means we are in the downward phase, but he doesn't have a mechanism. I think the mechanism may be found in the writings of Kondratiev partially, and I think also Anwar Sheikh has it. And they argue, and in fact, Kondratiev has argued that all these exogenous, so to speak, um, reasons for that many people have argued that they cause long cycles like innovations, wars, exogenous events. He tried to internalize them. And in fact, they are internalized through the rate of profit. When the rate of profit is in the downward direction and falls, and its fall means that businesses will go to default, or many businesses are threatened by default, they rethink of previous inventions and they try to commercialize them. So this is the reason why we have innovations in the downward phase of the rate of profit. The pressure to innovate is much higher than during the upward stage of the rate of profit. When it is in the upward, when the rate of profit starts increasing, it means that other people are willing to adapt these innovations. But as they do it, organic composition of capital increases, and then we are led to again to falling rate of profit and the new cycle. So the rate of profit is the cause for both innovations, social structures, and if I go a step further and follow what Kondratiev was saying, can explain also wars, revolutions, and I have added public debt, debt default, and wars. Okay, we said that. And in fact, if we take these events, I mean, if we try to measure, I mean, we take data for innovations or basic technologies. We measure defaults, state defaults, innovations, strikes, etc. We will see that these appear mainly in the downward phase of the falling of the rate of profit. I guess, and also new institutions. I mean, if we think about the new institutions and their appearance, I mean, and think of the Great Depression, for instance, of the 1930s, we will see the new institutions that they appeared during that period of time. They were consolidated in the 1940s, for 90 years, and then we had the period of high growth rate that lasted up until the end of 1960s. And after, in the new cycle that we experienced in the early 19 or mid 1980s, again we had new innovations, etc., with internet, and then we had also new institutions and so forth. And we are in the current period, which is the end, I would say, of a long cycle and the beginning of a new, probable beginning of a new cycle. I don't know if...
Well, I completely agree with Lefteris. This is where we agree greatly on promoting the idea of long waves or long cycles as an important contribution to understand what's going on in capitalism beyond just the booms and stumps that we get every 8 to 10 years, which we could discuss. That's another matter about why they happen. But we're talking about a longer period of time where the whole cycle from the start to the end is going to be 50 years or even more, I would argue, sometimes in later periods. And that it's driven by the upward movement of profitability at the beginning of the cycle and comes to an end with the downward movement of profitability. So we have an endogenous theory of long cycle, unlike the position of Schumpeter and others who see it either as one of innovations or just demography. We inbuilt it into the capitalist process itself based on the profitability of capital. And as Lefteris says, to some extent, Kondratiev also took that view. It's interesting that this has been attacked as mechanistic and that doesn't recognize the role of institutions in politics and so on. And Trotsky, for example, was critical of Kondratiev for this having a mechanistic theory of the long cycle. He saw the cycle as more as driven by changes in political institutions, wars, and so on. And I notice that Anis Mandel tries to bridge the two. He talks about the beginning of the cycle upward being based on an increase in profitability and introduction of, with profitability, new innovations that are being applied. But the cycle only comes to an end and cannot be reversed, in his view, unless there's a change in institution like a world war or a revolution. Otherwise, it will continue to go down, which I find is a sort of mixture of an endogenous and an exogenous theory, which I'm not very comfortable with. I think the way that Lefteris has described it is more accurate to the way that we understand the Marxist theory of crisis and therefore of long waves. For viewers, what's important about this is if it's right, then there are periods when there's going to be quite a long period of upswing generally for the major capitalist economies. And being able to judge when that's going to happen makes a big difference also for our political action, because as Lefteris says, in a period when profitability is down and capitalism is struggling, it takes action on tax working class, and we have an intensification of the class struggle. When things are going well and profitability is up, boom is strong, workers are getting better wages, we'll tend to have less intense class conflict. So it makes a difference to understanding what stage you're at, not only economically, but also politically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So perhaps I would ask you the next question then. In a Marxist framework, what are the various conditions, technological, but more importantly, socio-economical and political, that allow for a reprise in the rate of profit and for a so-called long boom?
Well, I don't know what Lefteris thinks, so I'll just try briefly. First of all, I'd start with, I think there's a contribution made by the theory of creative destruction. It's assigned to Schumpeter, and the argument is that first economies have to destroy the old capital, destroy the old technologies, destroy companies that don't work anymore. Currently we have loads of zombie companies which are staggering on, just being financed by debt and not actually making any investment and technological progress. So that they need to be destroyed under capitalism before we can create the conditions for smaller new companies with innovative ideas and innovations coming in and being applied to take the economy forward. He pinched it in a way from Marx, because Marx pointed out that the whole process of capitalist production takes place in the period of booms and slumps, and when the profitability falls, a crisis is reached, then a lot of the old capital is either devalued or even physically unused. And then that situation creates the condition for a new expansion of capital with a higher rate of profit, but perhaps starting at a lower level with those that survive the destruction, the slump. So we need a period where there's a cleansing of the old capital, where there's an opportunity to apply new technologies, AI, where the profitability is beginning to rise again and create the incentive for capitalists to apply those new technologies. Perhaps we're in that period now because we've discussed that as a possibility since 2020. So those are the conditions. Above all, profitability has to start rising and provide the incentive for capitalists to invest. But also perhaps the cleansing of the old order has to have taken place. The problem we have in 2026 now is there's not been much cleansing. Everything has been allowed to be sustained by the big institutions, government, monetary authorities. So we still have zombie companies, perhaps constituting 20 or 25% of the corporate sector in the major economies, who are just, in many ways, keeping productivity low, keeping investment low, and therefore not allowing the expansion of the more vibrant sectors. Maybe a good slump is the first task for capitalism to come out of this, at our expense, of course.
I don't have to say much about it. I think Michael said everything that uh, answer the question. Certainly, profit rate is very important, most important variable, and decides upon everything else. Clearly, innovations, when they are introduced, and they are introduced when the rate of profit is low, and this is the situation that we experienced in the 2020s, and we are experiencing now. In this case, the introduction of innovations as we observe these days, because from 2020 to the present, we have experienced swarms, really swarms of innovation, and AI is the major one, which really changes the way businesses function, and society in general is functioning. And this is just the beginning. Whether, and of course, businesses that do not follow suit to this direction, they are certainly out of the market after a while. Michael mentioned zombie firms, and he's right. And it seems that we are in this situation where more innovations are coming, which are going to be further introduced and so forth. But as I said before, the difference this period from that after World War II or after 1980s is that already the rate of profit is at a very low level, and it can rise, but I doubt very much whether it will ever reach the period of 1960s, which means that the situation is very precarious. It means that any time, any small, any shock, not necessarily big, will take the economy out of equilibrium, whatever that means. It means, of course, a lot of unemployment and so forth. And speaking of unemployment, I think that will become a very major issue in the years to come.
So this connects to the next question I wanted to ask you. If we look back at the 19th century with the Luddite movement, right, one main concern that everybody had was that technological changes and innovation would drive people out of employment, would cause unemployment, basically. However, throughout the past 150 years, capitalism has shown that whenever a new technology made certain services redundant, it also created new services, new opportunities for new jobs, right? Now, would you agree that this process is in a way related to two variables, is founded on two variables? On the one hand, whether technology would create, the new technology would create new actual products and sectors, so what could be called, in Marxist terms, new use values. And on the other hand, the organic composition of capital, of technology in general, the capital on which this technology is founded. Do you think that the current state of AI, or the AI investments and economy in general, meets these two fundamentals? And do you think that that's exactly what Gopinath is worried about?
Well, just quick. I think Gopinath is more worried about whether the investments being made by the big AI companies are going to deliver profitability or returns quick enough before there's a bust. I don't think she's thinking about the bigger issue that you've raised, which is, does new technologies like AI lead to a loss of jobs, or does it create new jobs to replace the jobs that have been lost and takes economies forward? I think I quite like what Marx said about that question in the 1850s. He said, look, when new technologies come in like that, they only come in and raise productivity if they shed labor. If they shed labor, they reduce the labor costs, they reduce even the number of workers involved. So the people who are working in industries which have been competed with or replaced by the new technology industries, they will get wiped out. Later on, that means they perhaps can shift into new industries, new sectors, or new products come forward, as you say, which create situation for more employment. And perhaps over time, there'll be more employment than there was before. But it could be the transition process could be incredibly bad for lots of workers, particularly workers who are in these older industries. And this whole process is not one which in any way would be described as the way we would like to see technology introduced in a social society, where we try to reduce the hours of work for everybody so that employment is delivered and the rise in productivity and use values created can be distributed so that we have less hours to work and everybody's working insofar as they have to. Under capitalism, it means huge lot unemployment for sectors of the population before there's employment in the new sectors. And that's been it seems to me, the historical experience of these processes under capitalism.
Well, the new technologies have quite different effects from the old ones. The new innovations, in other words, have completely different effects than the old ones. The old ones, starting from the period of Adam Smith to very recently, we will observe that they create more jobs than those that they destroy. Adam Smith, for instance, thought of new technologies that they just add jobs, they do not eliminate, or they have only positive effects. Ricardo changed that a little bit, but historic experience tells us that technological change was creating more jobs than those that destroyed. Can we say the same thing with the new technologies? My answer is that no. I mean, it seems that the new technologies destroy more jobs than those they create, and they affect industries or sectors of the economy that were thought in the past that they are not affected. And this is very important. This is something that I want to emphasize. In the past, for instance, in the late 1960s or 1970s, we had an economist in NYU, New York University, William Baumol, a very good economist, who argued about the cost disease of the public sector, meaning by that, or services in general, cost disease of services. And by that, he meant that services are not amenable to technological change. Technological change affects only industries, manufacturing mainly, but not services. Services are labor intensive and this doesn't change. So he spoke about the cost disease of the service sector, which means that in the services, productivity is stagnant or does not increase in any significant way, whereas productivity in other sectors increase. And so employees in other sectors get wages in accordance to productivity. And so their wages increase. But in the service sector, that productivity is stagnant. Nevertheless, wages also increase, and this creates a cost disease, so to speak, and reduces profits, reduces investment. And this is the reason why we have the stagflation crisis, that is to say, inflation rise because wages increase faster than wages increase faster than productivity, and also we have no profits for investment, and so investment is stagnant, and so we have stagflation. This story has changed, I think, with the new technologies. the new technologies affect all the economy, of course, but affect mainly services, industries, or sectors of the economy that were beyond imagination, I mean, in the past. So we see uh, real estate and finance and real estate industry to be affected. I don't know about Italy, but in Greece, I see many banks to reduce their number of employees. People go to pension or whatever that is, early retirement, etc. The public sector, also the employees there in the administration, so to speak, uh, their number decreases. The same thing is in retail, wholesale and retail trade, which employs many people, and they are not necessary anymore. And also we see that in health and education sectors. And so the new technologies really affect these labor-intensive sectors by far more than in the past. Empirically, some empirical studies, and one I have been also involved. The econometric results indicate that unemployment and productivity go together, both the increase. So there is a positive relationship with them, both in the short and long run. And so if we think a little bit more about it, and I happen to have two articles published already with former students of mine, we found that the unproductive activities in the economy are affected more than the productive ones. And so that means that the surplus value available for investment, because the unproductive sectors decrease, so the surplus value available for investment increases. That may become, something that affects positively profitability and investment in the future, and perhaps this might be the reason why we expect to see higher growth, or expect to see the upward stage of the long cycle quite, in the next few years. I think, I think this is...
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
Can I follow up with both a bit of a Keynesian and a political question? So I think as I understand it. So, for example, let's say in the U.S., health is already privatized. This mechanism that you are describing will mean getting rid of the admin jobs, so they can, basically save cost and focus on the productive element of whichever business they're involved. But wouldn't that create
Sorry, Carol. Sorry for interrupting. It's not just the admin jobs. I can tell you out of my experience in Singapore that there are experiments already carried out to eliminate even nurses and teachers.
And the next one will be economists.
No, actually, that is already happening in Singapore. DBS, the main bank of Singapore, the main service bank, I don't know how you call it technically, has already announced that by 2027 it will fire 5,000 people in an island whose population of citizens is 2.5 million. This gives you an idea.
Perhaps the reply to that would be that these people will then move into social care, dealing with people directly, rather than just answering questions down the line that AI can answer on health matters.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get to. So on one hand, to focus on the productive aspects of the business, but also wherever these jobs are, whether they are in the productive sector of the economy or in the so-called non-productive, the fact that the labor is shed wouldn't then create a problem of realization of of surplus value anyway, because there will be fewer people that will consume whichever goods you are producing. And also on the political note, if this labor shedding is happening to social classes that historically were, in a way, that constitute the consensus of capitalism, because white collars and generally this world of, let's say, middle class employment would be part of the winners. Now that they are, in a way, under the attack, what could be a political consequence of the fact that the labor shedding is in these sectors now?
Can I,
Yes.
unless Michael?
No, I'm looking to you to save me on this one.
Okay, perhaps you can continue what I will say. As for the realization problem that you mentioned, I will be just direct to your question. The realization problem that you mentioned does not exist, I would say, because production takes place not for people, for profits. So as long as there are profits, there is no realization problem. So under-consumption kind of theories must be set aside. I mean, they, at least from my point of view, do not exist, never existed. They are good pro-labor stories, but they are not scientifically, so to speak, correct. Now, the other thing that you mentioned, yes, the society gets increasingly more divided. We have fewer and fewer people, so that is to say, the 1% of the people have, or the 1% of the 1% of the people have higher and higher income, and worse than that, wealth. The inequality in wealth is worse than inequality in income, because income, you may say someone earns it, but wealth is something that you inherit, etc. And so this is something very divisive in society, and the inequality has increased a lot. And as far as I can see the data, I can tell that data get worse as far as equality in income distribution and wealth distribution. So this is where the gains in higher productivity go, and this is something that we have to take a very careful look.
I don't know, Michael, if you want to continue on this, or
I agree with what
Lefteris
has said, certainly on the realization question. This is a big debate within not only between Keynesian ideas, which is based somewhat on the question of underconsumption and the realization of lack of effective demand, but within Marxism, I would say that the view that Lefteris just expressed firmly, that there is no realization problem in the sense that we would understand a capitalist process of production, is probably a minority view. That the majority of Marxist economists accept some sort of realization problem. They want to merge the two things together. But that's another separate debate that we could have on this question. I think the main point here is being made is that unless we can have, unless probability goes forward, investments won't take place. If probability goes forward, investments take place, and the process of development of a new cycle is on the agenda. And that's what makes it so interesting at this current stage in 2026 to see whether we're moving into that period ahead, and whether that will lead to significant reduction in the number of workers that get employed and a large number of people who are not going to be working, and how do we handle that situation politically, and what will be the reaction of working people to that.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because I think a lot of people, I think that this Keynesian and then also Luxemburgian in the Marxist tradition, but also Monetary Review focuses a lot on the underconsumption theory. Can I just ask, just to maybe help me understand, and also for the viewers, what is the difference between, let's say, a more productivist and the under-consumptionist view. Would it be correct to say that for you, profitability comes first, because anyway, the vast majority of demand is investment-driven and not consumption-driven? Would that be a good way for, let's say, somebody that has delved into these internal debates within Marxists, a good way to frame it? That
I would add
investment is
the
really
empirical evidence is in our favor. That if we look at the question of slumps, for example, just before slumps begin, what factors do we see change before there are slumps in the economy? The first thing is we tend to see profits, massive profits slow down and even fall, followed by a fall in investment, the productive sector and capitalist investment, which people say, well, it's only 10% of the economy, but it's way more than that if you include the components within the economy which are not part of the final value added. But investment falls, and when investment falls, then only then do capitalists stop producing. Then we get a reduction in employment and a fall in consumption. The Keynesian position is completely the reverse of that. They say there's a fall in consumption, which leads to workers not having enough work to continue. Capitalists then can't sell anything, so their profits fall and we have a slump. But no, the evidence is clear. If you look at every single slump in the major economies since 1945 or even more, you will find the first factor is profits, the second factor is investment, and the last factor is consumption. In fact, consumption doesn't really fall much in slumps, personal consumption, workers' consumption. Mostly it's either flat or a little bit down, but only in the time sequence afterwards. So whether you want to argue about whether we need a consumption must or effective demand must be relevant to the process of the capitalist economy and its movements up and down, the empirical evidence shows that it's not the main factors. And in a capitalist economy where investment is for profit, and investment will only take place if profits are delivered, as Gita Gopinath is mentioning earlier, if it doesn't get delivered, there won't be the investment that will deliver. So that basis for a profit-making economy means that that's what matters under capitalism. No, capitalists don't care about whether the workers are consuming and are spending enough. They will get that in the process of a boost of investment and an increase in the economy in general. So this is a key argument that we argue within Marxist economics to some extent, but the empirical evidence is our favor, in my opinion.
Thank you, because I think it is like a classic chicken or the egg type of question. Another one I think you were referring in the other interview you had on your channel.
With chicken and egg, somewhere we have to start with the chicken or the egg. What do we do biologically? I think we start with the chicken, don't we? And the egg is consumption.
Yes, well, maybe we could. I was going to have two more, but maybe we could reduce it to one because it's already next 1 hour. So I was going to ask you something on the financial side of all of this. So, because I mean, I know that maybe from a productivist point of view, maybe this is not something that you will deem particularly relevant or maybe secondary, but I'm going to ask anyway. So, as well as this production role of AI, shouldn't we focus also on its role as a tool that has allowed sort of a mechanism of accumulation by alienation? And to clarify what I mean, I wanted to say that regardless of whether expectation of future profitability of AI investment would materialize or not, this expectation is nevertheless crucial in attracting capital from all over the world to the US stock market, driving a process of asset price inflation that served well the interest of financial capital, also in terms of wealth effect that then have got positive impact on consumption, by the way. So do you think that this analysis has got some ground? And if so, and if it is, how important it is for the US not to lose the AI battle which is currently fighting against China. So it's a question that is sort of like I've got DeepSeek in my mind now. So I wanted to ask you about this.
Well, with clearly the huge boom that we're getting in the stock markets in the US is being driven by the expectation that there's going to be significant profits gained by these AI companies and by the Magnificent Seven. I've seen the last week or so, investors are getting to get a bit worried that it might not be delivered, and they start to single out companies that have spent far too much and their returns may not come. But leaving it aside at the moment, clearly that's been the boom, partly the boom, but also the US economy has been doing a bit better than the other G7 economies. And so there's a somewhat enthusiasm to invest in the US economy. I was looking at the balance of payments figures recently, and you can see a dramatic increase in net portfolio investment into the US in equities, as opposed to being usually used into holding US government bonds as a safe haven. Now we've seen a big sharp increase since the pandemic in investment in US equities in the stock market, where people are hoping to, Europeans and Japanese and everybody else is hoping to make gains. Of course, that could all blow out in the next year if the AI bubble bursts. But the AI bubble and the stock market and the fictitious capital that's involved in that process aren't the same thing, of course, of the actual delivery of increased profits from productive investments that might come from AI that we've been talking about. So one may follow may not exclude the other. So even if you have an AI bubble that bursts, I think down the road we could still have a step change in productivity caused by these new technologies like AI that we've been discussing earlier.
Are you finished?
I finished.
Well, certainly there is a lot of money accumulated in the US stock market. The capitalization of the stock market in the US is twice the GDP of the US, which is quite, it's a record high level. Please correct me, Michael, if I... this is one thing. The second thing is that I have written some notes and also looked at the data, and I found that the gap between profits, corporate profits, and S&P stock market index increases with the passage of time. And the stock market, the S&P index increases by far more than the profits, the corporate profits. And when we say corporate profits and the stock market index, as we mentioned particularly the Magnificent Seven that Michael mentioned before, which possess 37% of the index.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of the profits, because these businesses do extremely well. Yeah. I mean, in both profits and index in the stock market. There is no doubt, in my view, that there is a bubble in there being built. If it will burst or will not burst, that I cannot tell, or we cannot tell when. But certainly we know there is one built already there, increases all the time. If profits manage to increase so much as to close the gap, perhaps it will go like that. But this creates a lot of tensions internationally, geopolitical, so to speak, issues that you mentioned before, because AI needs investment, and investment needs raw materials, needs markets, needs everything. And so international tensions increase with the passage of time. And this requires, once again, I mentioned, new institutions that will do something about all this. And these do not exist. meaning that we are in a very precarious situation. We don't know what will happen from one day to the next, and the same is true with the stock market.
One of the worries that you mentioned, Carlo, is precisely competition outside of the Magnificent Seven, outside of the big companies from places like China, not just China, but France too, but open source artificial intelligence models, which are, in terms of performance, certainly matching quite a high level and can deliver the sort of applications that the American companies claim that they can be able to deliver. DeepSeek being one, but there are others too. And this is a serious issue for the profitability and success of these AI companies in America. If these other competitors that are cheap, that I use, that cost hardly anything at all to operate, that you can use just as effectively as ChatGPT, which is the main open AI model. The argument of the American companies is, yes, so that's one thing, but we're going much further. We're going towards super intelligent AI, which replaces human beings altogether, surpasses human beings. That's our aim. And we're going to get that target within a few years. And then we will be top dog. The competitors will be wiped out because we'll be so far advanced in that process. Well, I think that's extremely unlikely that they will achieve that. And secondly, if they do, I'm extremely worried because God knows what a superhuman intelligence that's out of the control or in the control of a profit-making bunch would lead to. It's a frightening thought. But I don't think it's going to happen. And I think that the AI companies in America face serious problems in maintaining their share of the market. The barriers to entry are not that high, and therefore that will affect their profitability over the future.